Welcome to the Filmmakers 412 podcast. This is Michael Ray. Today's guest is Scott Danzig. Scott is a software engineer during the week and a passionate filmmaker on the weekends. In total, he's worked on over 20 films and directed 12. Some of the topics we talk about are subplots, motivationally driven directing, and he also shares some stories about the New York indie film scene. Here's our interview with filmmaker Scott Danzig. Okay, welcome, Scott. Thank you for helping me out here. So this should be interesting. Scott, first of all, tell me what you do when you're not filmmaking.
I'm a software engineer. I work for a telehealth company based in Boston. I do telecommuting for the company as a web developer mainly, which also lets me build my own websites.
Wow, that's nice. Now, I mean, you're a coder too, like you do CSS and...
that definitely falls under web development.
But are you a front end or a back end person?
Mainly back end. I do enough with front end to get by. Normally you have to do both, at least for a lot of jobs where they just get people who know what they're doing to do what needs to be done and bring in the expert when you need to.
Right. I'm a photographer, so I work with a lot of graphic designers who do a lot of the front end, and then they probably hire people like you to do the back end. But you work for a company, so it's not a freelance kind of thing, right?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. This is about filmmaking, so tell me how you got into filmmaking, how you first got interested and all that.
It all started back in, I think, the 90s. When I was starting to go to, with friends, to these anime conventions, specifically Otakon, which is based in Baltimore at the time. And they had these anime music video contests where thousands of people would watch these videos of popular songs with clips from anime synchronized to the songs. And it was back in the VHS days, so it was a pain in the ass to actually cut the anime footage and import it into a computer so you can do your video editing and produce it. But I used Adobe Premiere and got a feel for it. And my first entry was used Rammstein, and I do Hast, and I found this gory anime and put together a video, and there was like 5,000 or 6,000 people cheering for it, and it was just awesome. And then I knew the experience of creating something and seeing it on a big screen with people enjoying it, and that was where the bug crept in. And fast forward later on, I had these dark nightmares as a kid. I'm sure a lot of people do. Probably combined with some iffy sleeping habits, I had my share of night terrors, and all of this gave me this very intense visual imagery in my head that I thought was more powerful than a lot of what I was seeing in like horror movies, what you see with, I think Fangoria was popular at the time. So I was interested in maybe one day doing something along those lines myself. I really felt this attraction to dark storytelling. So, I had a couple of attempts at screenwriting before, but eventually I moved to New York City, where there's plenty of people interested in filmmaking. And I decided, well, I'm just going to figure out how to do a film. And I went to meetup.com and just had whoever wants to join me, let's make films together. Now I know that you are not going to produce something that's watchable that way, but it will it will teach you everything that could go wrong on a film set. So picture like 80 people, half of them had experience, half of them no experience at all. Some people were just obstructions to progress. There was one person that blew the whole catering budget in one day because she hired her sister, I think. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and I learned it through that experience. And I did have a script I wrote based on my lucid dreams and nightmarish visions that I figured we'd use as like a test film script. And if someone else had something they wanted to do instead, we would vote on it. No one did, so they were all happy to do the script, and I chose to produce rather than direct, and it got changed, probably for the worse. But we eventually got the film shot, and there were definitely problems. Like the lead actor dropped out before the last day, like just before, and we had to move forward anyway, so we used like a stunt double, and it didn't look right. And there was like all sorts of problems that went wrong.
How long was the film?
We were definitely aiming for short films, although I think the script itself was around 20 pages, maybe 18 pages, I think. But sadly, because of some politics, the director wanted the audio to be professionally done and never quite got there with pulling enough favors to make that happen. And I saw the footage. I knew that, it burns at my soul when a film is shot and doesn't actually get put together. I think that's the cardinal sin, to not actually deliver something that people
everybody
involved
goes through all that effort, and then
you have to at least show it could be crap, and you learn from it, but not actually delivering. I knew when that happened that I didn't want to be a part of this collective anymore. I thought, I did support them, and we did actually make another film after that did get created, and that was a good experience, but I already had one foot out the door when that first film never got made. And then they came up with like a science fiction film idea, which it was kind of like a spin on A Brave New World, except everyone in the world was depressed, which I found out later that someone else came up with that exact idea, which, you can't do anything original these days. You just have to do it in your own way. So I'm not worried about that. But after that, I was like, well, what? And I thought that came out really well. And there was some fire I had to walk over for that one, for sure.
This is all back when you were in New York, right?
In New York City.
How many films have you done total, would you say? Worked on. Not so much where you
worked. Well, it's under 20. My film specifically, at least a dozen. And well, I guess if you're saying just helped out in some capacity, it's probably over 20 actually. Okay. I've definitely, since I've moved to Pittsburgh, helped out on maybe about 10 or so, mostly doing sound.
What's your favorite part of filmmaking?
The favorite part is seeing things come to life. Taking a script and watching it watching the words be said with emotion. And I think everyone falls in love with filmmaking at some point because of that. Just every role in a production, you learn to appreciate when a professional, like someone who knows what they're doing, really takes hold of it and adds their own artistry. And you see, oh my God, it added so much more. Just appreciating music alone, it's especially when you have someone who gives their thought to the scenes and the script and knows what to emphasize when and setting the mood. And music can be breathtaking, how it could change a film. But I could say the same about every other aspect. I've learned, because I've seen everything go wrong, I've learned to appreciate everything so much more when it goes right.
Right. What's your favorite role in the whole production?
Definitely director. I was told at some point by someone who I respected to, after she looked at my body of work and knew what, ultimately I wanted to just get better, I guess, at the craft, and I was trying to get into film festivals, and it's still an upward struggle, but she advised just stick to where your passion is, and you'll be fine.
How many films have you directed?
At least a dozen by now. I mean, pretty much I have my Sneaky Ghost Films production company, which is, only so much money making as it's still kind of a side gig. But all of the Sneaky Ghost films I will have at least directed. I've been producing them too. Hopefully I'll find a good producer one day to hire. Will be no doubt worth their weight in gold.
How many have you shot here in Pittsburgh?
So far only one. I got my feet wet with this 3-minute film, Dark Awakening, but it's mostly been working on other people's shoots so far.
Do you feel like compelled to make films, or is this just sort of your hobby on the side?
They say that you don't work a day in your life if you enjoy what you do. I enjoy programming to some degree, but there's always ups and downs. I always enjoy filmmaking. Yeah, I definitely have like a true passion for it, and I learned to cut out all my other hobbies so I can actually do filmmaking. It's so time demanding.
So if you could, you would be a professional filmmaker?
Yeah, if I knew I could live off it, I definitely would.
But if you don't make it professional, you're okay with that?
Well, it's definitely still worth doing. I've had these thoughts lately, and I do want to take a shot at making more ambitious projects. It's just been short films so far, but I have a web series idea in mind that I think would be a more ambitious project, and also I've been hunting avidly for a good feature film script and chopping away at one that I'm working on myself. It would take a lot of confidence in a script for me to make that jump to try and do a feature, because it's a lot more money, and I would want to do it professionally and actually like try and go somewhere with it. So maybe if that falls in place and I do things right, I can actually start to think more seriously about it, or some other more ambitious project. But I've come to terms, it's definitely, even if it's always a side gig, I definitely love doing short films at the same time.
Okay, but if you could look into the future and you could see that like you never made it big, you'd still make films, right?
In fact, I've heard time and time again by people that do work in the industry that they enjoy the things on the side more than what they get paid for. There's the creative control aspect. And when software engineering does pay for my productions, especially if they're short films. I can hire people who know what they're doing. And I've learned that it's worth it to, like, even though I could skimp on things, I can like try and do with someone who's has less experience as maybe an AC, or maybe do without like a makeup artist or something like that. But if you put in twice as much money and you can have those, then that means that your film will go farther in film festivals, and it'll be more watchable, and it'll be able to convey its message better. If you have a career that supports like short film productions, you can still do like really quality filmmaking, even if it's just once a year. You could spend that whole year between each of your productions making sure the script is perfect, which I think is way rushed through for everyone that does things on the cheap. Your script, like working on that, it's not easy, and you can improve your film so much more just by not being afraid to rewrite your script after you get like as much feedback as you can. So that whole process I just enjoy, and it does result in quality productions that could make an impact. So I definitely enjoy like having that in my life.
You like the script writing aspect of it, or would you just soon do other people's scripts?
If I had a script that worked for me, I definitely would prefer to use someone else's script. if it's like a good script that resonates with me. The problem is it's really hard to find that, especially, well, I mean, if you put out a call for scripts on the internet, you're going to have to wade through a lot of very poorly written material. Every so often something kind of works for me, but then I'm thinking, well, it's kind of interesting, but then I think of like some personal stories I can turn into a script. I just think, like, because I do the scripts, the productions so few and far between, like once a year is typical, twice if I'm lucky. I'm committing like a lot of time and resources to that. So if it's just kind of like something that makes me do a chuckle at the end, I'm not convinced. And most scripts are not going to do better than that. If you're like, even if you're willing to pay for, like, to put some money into it. Now, if you go to the Writers Guild of America and pay like market rates that start at like minimum of thousands of dollars, I could go that route, but I can't bring myself to do it when it's just out of pocket.
What would be your dream project?
My dream come true would be someone having a powerful feature film script that works for me, and I am able to focus on the creative vision of it. And brilliant people are working with me to make the other aspects, technical and artistic aspects of the film, also brilliant. There was this quote that I like to repeat as much as possible, although I can't remember it verbatim. But it was when it was between, it was Terry Gilliam talking to Quentin Tarantino. I'm pretty sure Tarantino is expressing some sort of frustration with everything involved with film production. And Terry Gilliam stressed that your job as a director is to hire the best people who can bring your vision to life. And then you can focus on the directing. And that apparently made Tarantino enjoy life again, where all of a sudden, like, this huge weight was taken off his shoulders and he can just focus on how he wants to do things, and the acting and the message, like interpreting the script. So to be able to mentally churn over a script and creatively think of ways to bring that onto the screen, and there are people that are trying to support that, capable professionals, that definitely would be a dream come true for a script that I care about the message, of course.
You like wearing a lot of hats? I mean, I noticed that when I'm on a shoot, I don't like to wear a lot of hats. I like to wear one hat because just like Tarantino, I want to concentrate on what's the most important thing.
I hate wearing a lot of hats. I want to wear just the director's hat. The only reason that I wear a lot of hats, I just came, in New York City, certainly there was only so much limited experience on that volunteer collective. But then I hired professional crew for the next two productions I did after that, and I saw what things could be. I mean, there were still like some growing pains with those, but I had professionals working under me that made it so I can focus on the directing more or less. I was still a producer, so it was still a nightmare. But yeah, then I moved to Binghamton, New York, where there was very little film crew. And while I could hire some people to do some things, in terms of lighting and sound and camera, I trusted myself more than anyone I could hire. I had to import like a sound guy from New York, but you only want to import so many people.
You can only afford to hire so many.
I was willing to pay. I guess I was earning less when I was in Binghamton, the whole cost of living thing. But I was willing to pay to bring people on if they were available. It was just that every person you import from New York, you're waiting hoping that they'll appear for the production. It's another thing that could go wrong if something happened with a bus, right, or they didn't buy their megabus ticket correctly or bring the receipt to the Port Authority. Or maybe there's bad weather. There's blizzards sometimes in Binghamton. You want people to be local if you can. So I was doing a lot on my own. And at the same time, it was really useful because now I know how to do camera. And I mean, there are people that are, of course, better than me, like the guys who focus on it. But I'm to the point where I can have meaningful conversations with some decisions in each of the departments because I've done it myself and I've tried to succeed in each of them. So,
do you have a particular style that you've recognized?
I view things a little cynically and have more of a dark style in that respect. But I've learned to not worry about style. I just listened to an audiobook by Sidney Lumet, who was posed that same question about what's your style, and he was commenting that style was more of a symptom of circumstance rather than creative choice. I definitely see people who try to have a style or intentionally do things like, this is my style. I always make the shadows look blue or something like that. Well, that's more of a grading style, but still people who try and define their own style. But Sidney commented on Alfred Hitchcock, for instance. He definitely has a definite style, but there were people certainly the cameraman and other people in his crew that he trusted and developed a relationship. And when you have someone that you work well with, there's very little motivation to try someone new. So if you keep going to the same people, then you end up with things in your work from production to production that is done the same way, and that has a large part to do with what people recognize as the director's style. It's defined by the people that you get comfortable working with and the way you like to do things.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm fighting my own battle. Like when you're a photographer, you have a style whether you like it or not, and style is a result of having found a solution to a problem that you keep going back to. So It's just like you said. I mean, if your lighting guy likes this kind of lighting and you keep hiring the lighting guy, then you seem to develop your own style like that. And I guess I have seen people that what they do is they do things a little bit weird just for the sake of doing them weird, just so they look like a style.
I think about Aronofsky, which definitely you would think of as doing things weird intentionally. It's possible that it's just a symptom of experimenting. I think experimenting and seeing, I notice a lot of techniques he uses, he sticks with, and I don't think that he's being weird for the sake of being weird. I think he probably experiments and sees the impact it has, and when the story calls for it, he goes back to it. I mean, for directors like him, it definitely, and Tarantino actually, and probably all of them to some degree, who are more proactive with experimenting. I think I always try and film things more conventionally also in case it doesn't work out, but I think that it's important to always try and innovate and come up with new ways to express things, and those successful experiments I think could also define your style. It's another version of circumstance, what you come up with working out.
Push the envelope a little.
Yeah.
What are your strengths as a filmmaker?
Being a software engineer, I definitely have my technical ability to lean back on. I'm not afraid of going through a camera manual or looking at polar patterns of microphones, like just trying to figure out. Lighting was a huge mystery to me, and I just took some time, I think for like a year or two, just really focusing on figuring out what makes lighting cinematic. I mean, I knew that there was like some level of contrast, but for some reason I always looked at these professional Hollywood productions, and I see the way the shadows are hitting, and I was like, something about them is making this look really captivating, as opposed to if I just try and make things look moody by having like shadowy imagery. There's like, I learned like angles and the way you have separation of foreground and background really define that look, and I think I've gotten a lot better of a handle on it.
I think, I've actually kind of been going through the same thing. I mean, I'm a photographer, so I know what good lighting, in air quotes, good lighting looks like for photography.
Yeah.
But that's not the same as cinematic lighting. I mean, I've seen some really beautiful, effective shots that have had really bad lighting. You know what I mean? It's sort of, you don't go for good lighting a lot of the times. You try to make it appropriate for the message that you're trying to communicate. And sometimes that could be dark and moody and like you don't even see the person's eyes. And, it's like it would be bad lighting.
A big thing that I realized in terms of like cinematic, okay, well, lighting was a big mystery to me, but a big part of that is production design. Just if you film you try and make things look cinematic in your apartment, which has these white walls, and the things that are randomly strewn around your living room that without a concern of like composition, and wire these things in frame like magazines on that table could easily be distracting when you could just have like a flower in a vase that looks so much better in the frame. All of that comes together to make things look cinematic. So I always do that air quote thing when I say the word.
The thing that I noticed, I mean, this is sort of something that I've just realized kind of recently, is when I'm watching in a movie, there'll be a scene, and the scene looks effective, and it'll be relatively high key, but yet the person is relatively high contrast. And I've come to the conclusion that on almost every close-up, the cinematographers use negative fill. Like it could be kind of a light and airy scene, but they'll bring in 4x4 floppy in close when they're doing close-ups, and it'll give it that, shaping of the face when they do the close-ups. And so you get the best of both worlds. Like the background will still be high key, and you'll still have shape on the face. I think almost in every single shot, if you should try. I mean, if you don't try it already, you should try it. It's amazing.
I mean, that's interesting. That's new information to me. I mean, like having like high key exceptions within high key cinematography, where you might do something different specifically on the subject. I would say that starts to be where my balance between wanting to improve in everything and to focus on directing comes in. At this point, while you as a photographer definitely need to know about all of that, I would like a cinematographer that knows the finer points like that for me. I think that might be getting like too nuanced for me to keep in mind while I'm on a film set.
Right. I mean, I just thought that, you were just saying how your learning curve is, you've been including the lighting part of it. And that's just something that, I mean, I've been lighting for 30 years, what I mean? And like the cinema lighting is different for sure. And that's one of the things I've come to the conclusion, that's the new sort of thing I've learned. What's something you've just recently learned besides negative fill?
In terms of, if I was to focus on, I'm thinking about my last production that I did. One thing that I definitely have to keep in mind, I had like a vision for this 3-minute film that I did, Dark Awakening, in terms of lighting, actually. If we're going to stick to the technical, I could think of in terms of, like, there's certainly a lot in terms of acting that I'm usually thinking more about on set, or trying to. But in terms of lighting, I had some specifics with how I wanted the lighting to look like in terms of especially color. And I learned that even though I did have some bright lights, bright blue daylight colored lights motivated by the windows shining into this basement that I wanted to splash against the back wall, I still had to light the rest of the basement with this overhead green light, or at least motivated by it. And that green light mostly overwhelmed the blue light, so the window light that I wanted to splash on the back wall became very subtle. And not only that, but the fact that it was this overwhelming green light, it removed color from a lot of the film. Because if you light something with green, then you're not going to see any red or blue on your actor's wardrobe. It might as well be black and white, and then you just put a green cellophane over the screen.
That sounds like an interesting thing to learn on set. You weren't able to learn that beforehand. It's like you learned the day of the shoot. It's like, oh shit, this isn't working.
Yeah, I've experienced it before, and then you make the mistake more than once, and sometimes it takes more than once to sink in. I guess you really learn it when you're grading the film later, and there isn't much you could do with it, especially with, like, for my own productions, at least so far. I've been shooting on a Sony A7S II, which has 8-bit video, which means that whatever you want to do with the color needs to generally be in camera. You don't have, like Blackmagic, a lot of it is raw, and you can pull things out when they're overexposed, or vice versa in the shadows, and you could change to the correct white balance very easily. But with 8-bit video, you should get that white balance right.
As close as you can, huh?
Yeah, the less change you need, the better.
What are your weaknesses that you realize as a filmmaker?
My weaknesses, well, I don't think I finished my strengths necessarily. I would say
confidence is definitely not a weakness, huh?
Yeah, no. I mean, like, one thing that just to add one more strength, I think coming up with creative solutions on the fly. I think if you can't do that, then, well, just plan as best as you can, but it's going to be a really rough road to get anywhere. But in terms of weaknesses, definitely doing too much was definitely a weakness. I've learned the hard way that it really is worth it to put the money in, even if you have to do filmmaking a lot less. Just take your time with the script. Actually, script writing, I'm trying to address my weaknesses there. Yeah, I think it's worth focusing on the script writing, because while I could be inspired and sit down and write a story, there could be major improvements. I think people like my film Dream State, which is the one that I initially did with that all-volunteer group. I ended up redoing it later with a professional crew, and now, well, it's my wife's favorite, but people normally are like, well, wow, that was good after they see it. It takes a little convincing to get someone to watch a 21-minute film. But still, the film ends, and this might be a spoiler. The film is available if you want to see it on sneakyghost.com, but I think the ending was lazy. Like, it builds up to this point, and something tragic happens. I think that I could have come up with something a little more meaningful a little more satisfying, that showed like change in the characters and like a takeaway. Like, why are you doing this film? What do you want the audience to come away with? It can't be just, well, I want to tell stories. To actually have a purpose for your films, I think, is something that is the difference between amateur indie filmmaking and greatness.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've seen a bunch of films, and I've worked on a bunch of films where, the acting's good, the script to like the 90% part is really, it works for me. And then it's like the endings are disappointing. It's like, I don't know.
Because people write these stories and they don't know what they want the audience to leave with. It's they just have to, their story is told and they just have to end it in some fun way where you could tie a bow on it, but it has no purpose. And I think that you're doing a disservice to yourself if you try and just come up with a solution without having a purpose to that solution.
But doesn't that depend a lot on the whole genre you're working in? Like if you're in horror movies, like what's the great takeaway you're going to come away with from a horror movie? Like, is there one?
It depends. If you're going for a B horror movie when you just want to lean on a bunch of tropes and put people in seats, and your main purpose is to go make a film with a bunch of people and they all get together and watch themselves on screen, I think that is only going to get interest from so many people. But if you have like a meaningful character that is I'm only so much of a fan of horror movies to begin with, but the one that really resonated with me is The Ring. It was you watch this film and you'll die in 7 days. That was a really sure exactly what the takeaway that the director or the writer wanted.
That's almost, it sounds like, I didn't see the film, but it sounds like that would be pretty easy to come away with, okay, how do you spend your last minutes kind of question.
Yeah. It's definitely, there's a number of themes to every film. There's a number of themes to every film that, I think it's okay to have a story that has more than one theme.
Well, you need it. You need like, have you seen the movie just recently came out yesterday?
Yeah.
I've watched, I'm not a screenwriter by any stretch, but it's a kind of a hobby interest of mine. And I've watched all these YouTube videos about screenwriting, and the big thing is, okay, you have the surface story, but that's not what makes the film gratifying. It's the underlying love story or the takeaway, or that's the real story. There's like the outer story is just an excuse. And I think that Yesterday movie was a good example. That's a great start for a film when, like no one has heard of the Beatles. But it was a love story. It was a simple love story. And it worked, in my opinion.
Yeah, I actually got more about more of the message of, a story about success, or I guess what's important in life. I guess with Yesterday, like you have this wild fantasy of really making it and becoming this big deal. And in the end, it's not important to him, all of this success and fame. It's more about like what's important to us in our normal lives that I got as the takeaway. And I thought the John Lennon in the story definitely drove that home with that face-to-face. Okay, you got there. Let me tell you now that you're in my shoes, what I got came away with. And I thought that was a powerful story within a story.
Yeah, so to me, that would be the key of filmmaking, is to put that story in a story.
Yeah, it's not easy. And that's why, like, I'm working on this 6-page screenplay right now that, I've been looking for a screenplay that fits an experimental format that I want to do. Just the particular requirements, it has to be like 5 to 8 pages, and it has to have it has to be dynamic, emotionally dynamic, where you have this. I ended up seeing the climactic scene in Marriage Story, where they start to yell at each other. It all comes out, more and more emotion as they start screaming at each other, and I'm not looking for that degree of crazy emotion, but something that builds like that over the course of this 5 to 8 pages. And I came up with something about toxic friendship that is kind of like someone's finally standing up for themselves. I thought I could make work in that format, and that would work for my experimental idea. But going back and forth about what it says, and the characters being believable, but the story behind it and what I want the audience to take away. I've had so many iterations of it, and it's improving it. It's getting better. But just 6 pages.
That's not a lot of time to develop anything, really. So let me ask you this it's a similar question as to what you're talking about, or it relates to it anyways. In your mind, what is the difference between what you have to do screenwriting-wise in a feature versus a short?
Well, if I don't have the perfect script dropped in my lap, I'm probably still gonna want to make modifications anyway, even if it is a great script. I have enough preferences of how I like things to be, where I can't imagine not reworking the script a way that works with me. But
no, I think you misunderstood the question I was asking. I guess just in scripts in general, the characteristics of a script itself.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between writing a script for a short and writing a script, not necessarily the same script, for a feature film? What are some of the plot, the plot structure? How does it have to be different?
I think that I kind of understood, but I went off on too big a tangent. The big problem with short, and this is kind of what I'm experiencing with my 6-page thing, there's only so much you could build up, as you just alluded to, in 6 pages. And with shorts, you also want it to be short, because otherwise it's not going to go anywhere in film festivals. So with there is less that you can do with short films. With feature films, you have elbow room. Everything still should be important, but you can do things to add dramatic effect, and you can take your time. With shorts, it's a sad reality, but I've been shaving off 5 frames from a scene just because it's not necessary for the plot. Okay, maybe I'll have him exhale, and then I don't need the audience to see the venom in his eyes, because they probably got it by then. So I can cut it off 5 frames quicker and then move on to the next scene, cut. And you can shave down. I just shaved a 24-minute movie down to 9 minutes and 50 seconds. I had nothing to lose, because the film didn't do well in film festivals. So it was, and a lot of the feedback I was getting was there was extraneous things that didn't really serve the plot in there. So I just I hacked it up, and I got some feedback from other people that had some festival experience, they were like, well, you already said enough here, so you don't need him to repeat it here. So you can cut that out. And I was like, well, it kind of shows like a different side of him, but plot-wise, I agree, it's unnecessary. If you want something like to emphasize something means something more to him by showing like how much he's experienced, that you can put in a feature, but not necessarily in a short. So you have to, it's just the nature of the way shorts are received. I see Oscar or award-winning shorts that definitely are like 20 minutes or more that do take liberties, but unless you have like a celebrity on board, I don't think people are going to give you the benefit of the doubt. So that right there. Also, another thing is just the nature of the short, like what I'm dealing with now with this film about a toxic friendship. I'm trying to figure out a way to have a build up to that climax, because I can't just have it where that's the primary feedback I'm getting is it's just something that happens. The audience doesn't care about this relationship falling to crap. I look at Carrie, for instance, this like climactic ends, and there was a lot that built up to that, which works because it's a feature where you see like everything Carrie went through leading up to the end.
The Stephen King Carrie? Is that what you're talking about? That was sort of, I think the killer on, I haven't seen it in quite a long time, but the thing that got you on that was the tension was over. When she reached up from the grave, you thought the movie was over. You're ready to walk out the door, then all of a sudden, whoa. It was like, I remember that as like, okay.
Wait, we are talking about where the girl's covered in blood at the end with the humiliation in front of everyone.
Yeah, but the scene, like when I saw that in the theaters, that's how old I am, but when I saw that in the theaters, it was a good movie, but it wasn't that memorable. The thing that got me is at the very end is when the kids went to the grave and all of a sudden the hand comes up, and it was like, that's what I remember from that whole movie, was like, holy shit. But it was so powerful because all that tension had already dissipated, and it was just like, you thought, okay, I'm safe now. Then all of a sudden, whoa. That's what I thought was the main thing about that movie. But I guess there's all kind of different people walk away with all kind of different things.
No, I didn't even remember that. I guess it's been a while since I saw that too. I definitely remember like I guess there's been remakes since, so you see the girl in blood in movie posters. So it's easier to remember that. But yeah, definitely the ending image leaving a lasting impression is a success for a filmmaker.
That's what I remember. Okay, where do you go to continue learning about filmmaking?
Definitely other people's sets, which I try and do, but I've been certainly prioritizing reading books on directors by successful directors like Sidney Lumet, I mentioned, and John Badham wrote a book that was fascinating. He was talking about like how you have like these beats during a scene, and the actors have go up to a certain point where there's a pause in their dialogue, and then they change goals, and the actors are motivated by that new goal, and you have this progression of a scene where actors try and attack a conversation using different goals. And I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about how to direct and structure a scene. So definitely books by the experts, certainly plenty on YouTube these days, and experience actually directing. Directors have it kind of rough, at least the ones that aren't like working directors, because directing gigs are fewer and farther between than crew that goes out there every day. So there's only so much you could learn on your own set, but you certainly learn a lot every time you go out there.
Watching somebody else make mistakes. Huh? What are some of the common mistakes you've seen other filmmakers make, where you're part of the crew or whatever, and you're just like rolling your eyes thinking, oh, I've been there? And, what are some things you see done over and over?
The big thing is that most directors haven't taken an acting class, and they don't understand the acting process. So certainly just understanding why results-oriented directing is bad. You tell them why they say things a certain way or why they feel a certain way, rather than just telling them to say it a certain way or to feel a certain way. It makes so much difference in the way a line is delivered.
I'm not sure I understood what you said. Can you do that again? Because that sounded interesting.
Yeah, there's this thing called motivationally driven directing, and this is what works for trained actors generally. If you tell someone to say a line a certain way, it's called like a line reading. Say, I'm tired of this crap. And they're not quite delivering it like you want. So you're like, okay, I'm tired of this crap. Say it like that. And then it doesn't quite sound right. So you keep getting to repeat it. And eventually it kind of sounds sort of like what you want, but it's not nearly as powerful as, okay, you come up with motivation like, okay, he keeps doing this, he's done this literally like 5 times and just doesn't seem to be getting it, and you've been up for 32 hours already, and you have like so many things on your mind, and maybe you have a headache. All these things can change the way a line is delivered. And if you tell an actor to say the line as if these circumstances were true, then it becomes natural and less sounding like it's read from a script.
Right.
And
gotcha.
Not many independent directors get that right. So it definitely helps and there's so many other benefits, but it definitely helps if you manage to go to an actual acting class and learn. I learned Meisner technique to some degree, but something inspired by Stanislavski.
What's your most memorable shooting experience?
There's certainly something most memorable about every shoot. Like you're doing something specific, and I've learned to recognize those moments. Like, this is what's truly awesome in indie filmmaking, that we get to do this. I mean, like, whether it be like I have this antique vase that I'm trying to let crash to the floor in slow motion, or this torch that we had imported from Latvia that we're going to use for this. It was like exploring the dungeon scene or something, and no one knew, like, we had like a fire extinguisher ready and stuff, but people are unsure. I'm like, well, when you worry too much, you go for it anyway. That's usually a sign that you should do it. It's as dumb as it sounds, but definitely the most memorable moments is driven by the acting, when everything is set up and the actors really nail a scene. I would point at the one that's standing out, and there's a lot of instances like this, but the one that's standing out is actually, let me say 2 ones. There's one where I went for an actress that I met through my acting class, and I was working really hard on the lighting for like this special effect where I wanted to show like the inner turmoil of this character during this breakup scene, and I was gonna film it like with lighting one way and then with lighting the other way, and then stitch them together and like do some motion tracking, so it looked like one head and one side was showing a different expression than the other. And when the actress did the normal way, she had this one tear that rolled down perfectly through the lighting. It was like the most perfectly lit tear, and when I put together the visual effect, which worked out perfectly. Yeah, that was like just to see like an actor deliver perfectly when you're doing something very technical where everything has to be like angled just right. It's just like inspiring movie magic. And then there was the other time when I was doing Dream State in Brooklyn, where we had a street. I mean, I've reserved a street in New York before, but I had like 1 foot out the door of New York City. I was about to move, and the film office was dragging its feet. So I'm like, well, we can just try and get this done without reserving the street. And we probably should have. We were pretending that there was a car crash, and there was this car at some weird angle, and we had like this fake broken glass and bloody actress in the driver's seat. And so I was just get it done, whatever. And like, there's a lot of crap that goes on in Brooklyn that people get away with. So we figured we wouldn't be any exception. And people were just ignoring it. Like, we could scream in the street.
Like it happened yesterday too, only for real yesterday, huh?
Yeah, probably. But yeah, we were waving people by, and then there was this one pair of headlights. It was in the middle of the night. One pair of headlights were trying to wave by, and they just won't budge. And I'm like, come on already. And then eventually they start to take their sweet time to drive by, and I noticed that it's a van. It says NYPD on the side of this van. And I'm like, oh shit. So I back off, and I let the van go by, and they just stop and right along our car. And I see them rolling down the window. I don't see their faces, but they're obviously looking at our fake car crash victim.
They wanted to make sure they should be, if they should be doing their job or not.
Maybe. I just heard the word, holy shit. And they drove off. And I knew that if we got the NYPD to react that way to our car crash, we did something right.
So what are some things you're working on now?
Well, there's that 6-page script that I've been churning over for my experimental format film. I had this idea where it was inspired by this TED Talk where you have someone who recorded every word, every utterance that their child made of the word water, and you could see how it progresses and gets like closer and closer to wah, and then all of a sudden they regress a little, like blah, 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 and then all of a sudden water, and the whole TED Talk audience, they cheered. Like it took like hundreds of utterances, and just that audio way of presenting the evolution of the word was interesting. And I was thinking, well, why not try that with actor dialogue? So I was thinking like from audition all the way to the final, like through rehearsal to the final presentation. And I've been churning over what type of script to use. And I know that I wanted like building emotion in that, and to try and get that right has been like, because I want the script to stand on its own also. It's been a really hard slog to figure that out.
So how long would the script segment be that you're repeating over and over?
Well, I'll pick and choose the lines after the shoot. I was thinking I'll film it conventionally and also film the rehearsals and the auditions. And then at any point I could drop to audition and go through rehearsal up to that line being delivered. It could end up being a complete catastrophe. This goes back to what I was saying about experimenting always being good. But I'm also filming it conventionally, so at the very least I'll have what I hope to be a good film on its own, like a good watchable film that has some film festival prospects. But hopefully a lot of people are really interested in the experimental format too, so that's definitely my priority.
Yeah, I think I think more people should be content with the process and be willing to experiment and be willing to fail, and just be happy that they did it. You know what I mean? Like,
as long as they deliver on the film. But definitely you have to enjoy the process. I mean, the process in many ways is also agonizing, miserable. Just the nature of the beast, like being on that other shoot for 18 hours straight. You start hating life by the 14th hour or so, and then you're still there for 4 more. And you don't want to be the type that runs to your car without helping cleaning up. So there's always physically it's demanding, and I think it's okay to not enjoy all of it as long as you're always thinking creatively and working on things technically. Whatever you enjoy is part of the process. You feel alive during it, and you're a part of like making something. That's why the final product, I think, is always important.
I agree with you there. Okay, what advice would you give to someone just breaking into filmmaking?
My main advice is it's okay to do it on the cheap while you're learning, and in fact, you should. There's way too many people that are trying to figure out what type of camera, like they're excited by these cameras. Maybe they have some money. They probably don't think about sound equipment or C-stands or lighting, and all the other aspects, like how much good crew costs. Like if you actually have a dream of making a film that is at least film festival quality or something that you can actually sell, you need to do it right. So while you can have fun while you're learning, you shouldn't think that you can get there before you actually figure things out. So I recommend to film with your smartphone. It's okay if you have crappy sound and grainy footage. You should still like try and maybe use another smartphone or something to record separate sound closer to the subject. Still like practice the process, and eventually when you think, okay, well, I really want to try and do things right with this, I'll try and like maybe get like a Canon T3 camera or something, and like just borrow something, or maybe like you can get like a starter Rode microphone kit or something when you start to get more serious about that. But when you're actually trying to have a production that goes somewhere, you need to have learned everything before then. So what I'm saying is like learn with the cheap equipment. Don't pretend that it's going to be like something that'll go places or even be watched by many. Just like the people involved with the production and your family and friends will watch it, and that's it. Like you're kidding yourself if you expect more than that. But when you've really learned everything, then the best thing to do is hire people and rent equipment that you need. That's how good quality filmmaking is done. And if you have like more of a serious interest in doing amateur productions, it's okay to like buy equipment. Like maybe you do want to work crew on other people's sets. That's an excuse to actually buy things. But if what you care about only is the films, you shouldn't do that with your own expensive equipment. There are people that know how to do it better than you, and there's equipment that you can't afford for your short film or even feature that will be better than what you can afford. So that should be what the important thing is learning the process and having a purpose to your work.
When you say process, you mean craft, learning the craft of filmmaking.
The craft. But there's also one other thing that is very important, and that is to do more than filmmaking. You can be an extremely passionate filmmaker, but no one will care about what you're making movies about if you don't have experience in other aspects of life. People love a war movie from someone that's been in war. If you're doing a movie about a painter, you should have experience painting. or you really have to learn about it. It's okay to not like be an expert painter if you're making a movie about Michelangelo, but you have to learn about him and everything he was going through if you want to make a movie people want to watch about it. The more things in life that you learn about, the more things that you can make movies about that people are interested in. And people are generally, like, film students are the ones that make movies about filmmakers. But once you're no longer a film student, you don't have that excuse anymore.
Okay, so this brings us to the end of this. Where can people reach you, or how can they reach you, and how can they see some of your films?
Sneakyghost.com. That's one word, sneakyghost.com. And it has a link to my Facebook page and also a way to contact me in email.
Okay, and it better be a really well-designed webpage too.
It's a wonderful webpage.
Okay. Well, thank you, Scott, and I appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. If you found us on our webpage, please leave a comment and let us know what you think. If you found us on iTunes or Spotify and you like the show, please leave a rating or review. And if you have any filmmaking friends that you think might enjoy this, please share it with them. Thanks again, and we'll be here next week with another episode.